Okay, so have you ever felt like you're kind of stuck with your IELTS writing score? Maybe you're hovering around that 6.5 mark.
Right.
And you feel like you have a decent grasp of English.
Yeah.
Your grammar's pretty solid. You got a good vocabulary, but that score just refuses to budge.
I hear that a lot.
And it's got you thinking like, what are those people who are hitting band 8 or even higher? What are they doing that's so different?
Yeah, what's the secret sauce, right?
Exactly. Like, is it all about just knowing more fancy words, or is there something else going on?
It's a really good question because you can know a ton of English and still hit a ceiling with the IELTS.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack how one student went from a 6.5 all the way to a band 8 in their IELTS writing. And the really cool part is this is something you can definitely achieve too.
Totally. And what we're going to do in this deep dive is dissect the most common mistakes that trip people up in the writing section.
Right, because knowing the language is one thing, but there's a whole other layer to it.
Absolutely. So we're bringing in some expert insights on IELTS prep to give you some actionable steps that you can use right away.
So you can see real progress.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, so let's kick things off with a bit of a surprise, perhaps.
Okay.
The number one thing that often holds people back is actually a misunderstanding of the question itself.
It sounds so basic, but it's true.
It does.
And, I see this all the time. Students get so focused on showcasing their language skills, using complex sentences and impressive vocabulary.
Yeah, trying to wow the examiners.
Exactly. But in the process, they sometimes miss the core of what's being asked. Have they actually answered all parts of the question?
That makes sense because you could have the most beautiful grammar.
Yeah.
The widest range of vocabulary.
Yeah.
But if you haven't really addressed what the question is asking, those language skills alone won't necessarily translate into a higher score.
Exactly. It's about hitting those specific points.
All right. Okay. So let's paint a picture here. Imagine you see a question that says, why do people work long hours? Is this a positive or negative trend?
Okay. Classic IELTS question.
Right now, a very common pitfall is to jump straight into talking about work-life balance.
Yeah, the stress, the burnout, the importance of leisure time, all very relevant.
Absolutely, and all things that you can discuss eloquently with sophisticated vocabulary.
If we go back to the specifics of that question, you start to see the disconnect.
Yeah.
Because while talking about work-life balance touches upon the effects of long working hours, it might not directly address the initial why.
The why.
Why are people putting in those extra hours in the first place?
Like what's driving them in the first place?
Exactly. And even more importantly, it might completely sidestep that second part of the question. Is this trend a good thing or a bad thing?
You have to take a stance.
You have to express an opinion.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're missing crucial elements of the task.
So you could write a beautifully crafted essay about work-life balance. But if you haven't actually stated why people work long hours and whether you think it's positive or negative, you're essentially leaving the examiner hanging.
It's like going to a restaurant, ordering a steak and getting a salad instead.
It's not what you ordered.
Exactly. It might be delicious salad, but it's not what was on the menu.
It's not what you asked for. So what's the key takeaway here for our listeners? What should they be doing?
So the pro tip here is deceptively simple, but so powerful. Before you write a single word of your essay, take 2 minutes to break down the question. Really dissect it.
Okay.
Underline those keywords. Identify each distinct part of the prompt and make a mental map of how you're going to tackle each one.
So it's like planning your route before you start a journey?
Exactly. It's about having that clear roadmap from the beginning.
So you don't get lost along the way.
And that small investment of time at the start can make a huge difference in keeping your essay focused and on track.
Right. So you're not just randomly throwing ideas at the wall and hoping something sticks.
Precisely, it's about strategic writing.
Okay, so we've established that understanding the question inside and out is paramount.
Uh-huh.
Now let's move on to how you actually present those ideas once you've got them.
The structure.
The structure, because a jumbled mess of brilliant thoughts isn't going to score you points.
No, you need that clear, logical presentation.
So the examiners can follow your train of thought.
Exactly. They're not just looking for smart ideas. They want to see how well you can organize and express those ideas.
It's like building a house. You need a solid framework before you start decorating.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So give us that winning framework for an IELTS essay. What's the blueprint?
So the structure that consistently works really well is this. You start with an introduction where you paraphrase the question.
Okay.
Put it in your own words and state your opinion very clearly.
So no sitting on the fence.
No fence sitting. Then you move on to your first main body paragraph where you directly address the first part of the question.
Okay.
And then in your second main body paragraph, you tackle the second part of the question. And finally, you wrap it all up with a conclusion that summarizes your main points but without repeating the exact same phrases you used earlier.
So it's like a neat little package.
Exactly, tied up with a bow.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about essay structure out there. What's a common mistake that people tend to make?
One major pitfall is relying on those generic, pre-prepared essay templates. You know, the ones that start with nowadays, this is a controversial issue that affects many people around the world.
Oh, yeah, those examiners see those a mile off.
They can spot them from space.
They read thousands of essays, and these formulaic openings just don't add any real value.
And they can actually work against you.
Yeah, they can give the impression that you're not really engaging with the specific question that's been asked. It's like you're trying to force your ideas into a box that doesn't quite fit.
Like trying to squeeze into a pair of jeans that are 2 sizes too small.
Exactly. It's uncomfortable and it doesn't look good.
So ditch the templates altogether.
Absolutely. Instead, focus on organizing your own thoughts and arguments, using that straightforward structure we talked about.
So it's about being genuine and authentic in your response.
Yes, and that clarity and directness will impress the examiner far more than any generic template.
Right, because they want to see your thinking.
Your critical thinking skills.
Your ability to analyze and respond.
Exactly.
Okay, let's zoom in even further now and focus specifically on the introduction.
The all-important first impression.
Exactly, because we all know first impressions matter, and that applies to IELTS essays too.
A weak introduction can really set a negative tone for the whole essay.
If it's unclear or rambling or doesn't properly introduce your stance,
It's like starting a presentation with a shaky voice and no eye contact.
it doesn't inspire confidence.
Not at all. So what's a typical mistake people make when they're trying to write a strong introduction?
Often students feel this pressure to come up with a really dramatic hook or to give a long historical overview of the topic,
They want to sound super academic.
like they're writing a PhD thesis.
But IELTS writing is about clear and concise communication. It's not about showing off how much you know.
So can you give us a concrete example of what not to do in an introduction?
Sure, let's stick with our long working hours question. A less effective introduction might go something like this. Since the dawn of civilization, humankind has pondered the delicate balance between labor and leisure. with ancient philosophers and pioneering economists offering diverse perspectives on the optimal allocation of time. This complex and multifaceted issue continues to resonate deeply within contemporary society and so on.
Okay. Wow, that's quite a mouthful.
It is, isn't it? And it doesn't really get to the point of the question.
It's like you're taking a very long scenic route when you could just take the direct highway.
Exactly. You're losing the examiner along the way. Yeah. So in contrast, what would a good effective introduction look like for this question?
Okay, so a much stronger introduction would be something like this. The prevalence of individuals working extended hours in today's society is often attributed to factors such as increased financial pressures and a highly competitive job market. While such dedication may be perceived as beneficial for individual career progression, I contend that it ultimately yields negative consequences for both personal well-being and broader societal equilibrium.
That's much better. It's clear, concise, and gets straight to the point.
What are the key ingredients that make this a good example?
So first, notice how it directly paraphrases the core ideas from the question. The reasons behind long working hours are mentioned there, with increased financial pressures and a highly competitive job market.
Okay.
And then crucially, it presents a clear opinion. It directly addresses that positive or negative trend element by stating a belief in its negative impacts on well-being and society.
So no ambiguity there.
No, it's right there in black and white.
So what's the golden rule for introductions?
Keep it short and sweet. Aim for 2, maybe 3 sentences at most. Clearly paraphrase the main parts of the question to show you understand it and state your opinion without any hesitation.
Don't beat around the bush.
Exactly. Jump right in.
So to sum it all up for our listeners today, it sounds like the key to boosting your IELTS writing score, especially if you're stuck around that 6.5 mark, isn't necessarily about cramming in tons of obscure vocabulary or memorizing complex grammar rules.
It's about the fundamentals.
It's about those core elements, understanding the question, fully structuring your essay logically, and crafting a clear and focused introduction.
And then practicing those skills consistently.
Exactly, because practice makes perfect, or at least it gets you closer to perfect.
And that consistent effort will really pay off in the long run.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what do you feel is your biggest challenge when it comes to IELTS writing?
Take a moment to really think about that. What tripped you up the most?
And if you found these insights helpful today, please share this episode with someone else who might be struggling with their IELTS prep.
Because we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And be sure to tune in to our future episodes where we'll continue to bring you more expert tips on mastering English.
And finally, remember that truly mastering those seemingly simple fundamentals of understanding the question and structuring your response can make a much bigger difference in your IELTS writing score than just focusing on advanced language.
It's about laying that strong foundation.
Exactly. And from there, you can build anything.
So go out there and ace that IELTS exam.
You got this.
We believe in you.
We do.